Well, good morning. I'm Robert Pittenger, Chairman of the Parliamentary Intelligence Security Forum. We welcome you for this very important forum, particularly for parliamentarians watching from around the globe. We have 41 countries that I checked a little while ago who have already are observing this webinar today. Certainly, we have many, many more that are able to watch the video that we'll send out following the webinar. But thank you particularly to the Shura Council of the State of Qatar for co-hosting this very strategic webinar today entitled, How Effective is the Legislative Role in Promoting Cybersecurity? A very strategic webinar that will be presented. I do want to thank the Foreign Ministry at the State of Qatar, and I want to thank Ambassador Al-Qahtani and all their teams for the very important role that they played and been so helpful in guiding and preparing for this webinar. Also would like to thank J.C. Boggs, who is on the board of the Parliamentary Intelligence Security Forum. He's with King & Spalding Law Firm there in 23 cities around the globe, and provide guidance and counsel to governments on policy issues. So we welcome each of you today. This will be a very thoughtful presentation by some of the best experts in the world, from industry and from government. You will have the opportunity to offer questions. If you could email them in to Lucas at pi-sf.com. He'll put that up on the screen in a moment. And following the presentations, we will have the opportunity for the questions. So again, thank you for joining us. Would like now to introduce to you the Secretary of Homeland Security for the United States, Mr. Chad Wolf. Mr. Wolf is traveling today, but he provided for this webinar a very important message relative to cybersecurity and the role of the legislative body. He is also the Undersecretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. In his role, he gives leadership toward policy making to coordinate strategies and policies for a Homeland Security mission to protect America and, yes, every country around the world. He has given leadership to several significant initiatives to counter international and domestic terrorism, prevent terrorist travel, safeguard the U.S. electoral process, protect American trade interests. More recently, he was awarded the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Distinguished Service Medal. So now we will hear the presentation from Secretary Chad Wolf.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today on one of the most pressing national security issues of our time, cybersecurity and the impact it has on our global community. I'd like to thank Congressman Pittenger, the Parliamentary and Intelligence Security Forum, and our ally, the State of Qatar, for hosting this important event. I would also like to recognize my fellow speakers from the U.S. Congress and the Qatari Shura Council for their thoughtful comments. Finally, I'd like to thank the more than 23,000 parliamentarians and government officials from more than 170 countries joining us for this security forum. While the COVID-19 pandemic prevents us from meeting together in person, I am most grateful for the opportunity to meet you in this virtual setting. The history of the Department of Homeland Security is filled with instances of overcoming new challenges and threats to our country. Since our inception 17 years ago, we've worked at the forefront of a constantly evolving threat landscape with the ultimate goal of keeping the American people safe and secure. And I'm proud to say that no matter the threat, we have seen significant success in this critical mission. The prescription for our success has been our nimbleness, agility, and ability to think strategically and creatively to overcome problems. In the department's early years, our immediate focus was on preventing international terrorist organizations from attacking the U.S. homeland. Since then, Congress has invested DHS with the responsibility to address numerous additional challenges, including those concerning cyber and infrastructure risk, transnational criminal organizations, immigration crises, natural disasters response, and many others. Each of the challenges we face have required us to reassess and adapt our thinking, but the cyber domain in particular poses both great opportunities and incredible vulnerabilities to both the United States and our friends and allies. Rapid advancements in computer technology over the past few decades have given humanity the opportunity to flourish faster than ever before. Tasks that took countless hours and several individuals can now be completed in a fraction of the time and with far fewer people working or even automatically. Family and friends from across the globe can connect with each other whenever they like. Businesses and entrepreneurs are able to forge relationships practically anywhere they choose. And a child living in a remote part of the world can have access to the wealth of human knowledge with only a computer and a fast internet connection. But with our increasing reliance on computers and computer networks, we in turn increase our vulnerability. Like any great technology developed throughout human history, the cyber domain can be used for nefarious purposes just as easily as it can be used for productive and beneficial ones. Put simply, computer technology is a force multiplier for both us and our adversaries. Nation states that cannot challenge the conventional military strength of the United States and our allies can instead target us with hackers, viruses, and other cyber tools. Even rogue actors, terrorist groups, and other similar organizations can pose a legitimate threat to our national security of not just one nation, but indeed of several countries. And make no mistake, the nature of the cyber threat is complicated, asymmetric, and much closer to home, especially as we continue to integrate national infrastructure into cyberspace. Historic adversaries like Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, in addition to terrorist groups and cyber criminals, are well aware of this vulnerability and have already taken measures to exploit it. For example, as I speak to you today, we know that China and Russia are engaging in cyber espionage and attacks against COVID-19 research. This analysis tells us a few things about the nature of the cybersecurity threat. First, we know that increased reliance on computer network provides our adversaries the opportunity to pose a threat to our infrastructure and therefore to the national security itself. Second, we know that our adversaries themselves can come in various forms and strike from anywhere across the globe. And third, we know that the interconnected nature of cybersecurity requires us to engage in international collaboration if we are to achieve our mutually shared goal of protecting our citizens. President Trump and DHS are countering those who would seek to abuse technological advances to our detriment. Since his first day in office, President Trump has prioritized enhancing U.S. cybersecurity capabilities, especially in regard to securing our critical infrastructure. Accordingly, the United States government is pursuing a comprehensive strategy to confront malicious cyber actors, whether they are states or stateless entities. We will not rest until we vanquish all such enemies. It took some of our leaders in Congress and across our federal government time to come around to the reality of the cybersecurity threat, but I'm sure each parliamentarian and government official watching today understands the difficulty in addressing such a constantly and expeditiously evolving issue in governmental settings. The reality is that the cybersecurity domain moves at a much more rapid pace than government bureaucracy, which in and of itself poses a unique challenge. That said, thanks to the President's leadership, we were able to establish the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency just 2 years ago, providing the United States government with a powerful tool it uses to protect our most critical infrastructure assets. CISA, operating under the Department of Homeland Security, leads our national effort to protect and enhance the resilience of our physical and cyber infrastructure. It is focused on providing deterrence and strong network protection across the country in order to make it harder for our adversaries to succeed in targeting our systems. And in just 2 short years, men and women of this agency have truly outperformed all expectations and have established themselves as the cornerstone of the U.S. national security in a very short period of time. While DHS and CISA are primarily focused on securing American infrastructure, we are well aware that cybersecurity is a domain that requires international cooperation and partnership. Through our bilateral and multilateral partnerships, DHS is reaching across a broad cross-section of countries and international organizations to exchange best practices so that we can all better respond to the rapidly evolving cyber threat landscape. For example, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, DHS is partnering with allies to foster collaboration in key areas related to the protection of the healthcare industry, emergency communications, and the spread of disinformation. Today, CISA is proactively sharing its COVID-19 guidance and resources with 34 different countries and 7 international organizations. Additionally, in coordination with our international allies, we identified companies playing a critical role in developing a vaccine for COVID-19 and have prioritized these companies for services and incident response should they be needed. These services include monitoring and detection, intrusion protection, information sharing, data loss prevention, vetting of key personnel, physical security assessments, and cybersecurity assessments, all of which are provided free of charge. Utilizing a whole-of-government approach, we also continue to engage and collaborate with partner nations on shared key issues as they relate to 5G resiliency, malicious cyber actors, critical infrastructure, election security, and countering foreign influence. Since April, CISA has issued 5 joint alerts with our close allies to expose the work of malicious cyber actors. We are also promoting dialogue with our international partners by issuing joint products and collecting information on the approaches other countries are taking so that our subject matter experts can learn from their experiences. Thanks to our work with multilateral organizations, we are also working with several countries and private sector organizations to exchange best practices. As we look toward the future of shared international cybersecurity challenges, we must also be aware of the risks posed by infrastructure technologies that transcends borders, most notably 5G. This technology promises to revolutionize the telecommunications landscape, but also brings with it significant risks for any country integrated into the 5G network. High-risk manufacturers of 5G critical components from countries like China risk introducing vulnerabilities to the supply chain. This is because malicious actors will have more vectors to intercept, steal, disrupt, and destroy critical data, as data flows will be larger than in previous generations of wireless communications. From our perspective, there are certain areas of critical infrastructure where no amount of risk can be tolerated at the scale 5G would allow. These include oil and natural gas pipelines, the backbone of our telecommunications infrastructure, sensitive government and military facilities, and mass transit. The threat here is shared because in one country, if the 5G network introduces high-risk components, it has the potential to endanger others. That is why we're encouraging all countries to adopt a risk-based security framework for the rollout of their 5G networks. Indeed, we urge everyone to conduct a careful evaluation of potential hardware and software equipment, vendors, and the supply chain, not only for their own safety, but that of their allies and partners abroad. Thankfully, we are already making great strides on this front, starting with this last year's Prague 5G Security Conference, where 40 countries met to discuss a set of principles on how best to design, construct, and administer secure 5G infrastructure, known as the Prague Proposal. Establishing these kinds of international cybersecurity norms is absolutely essential to our collective efforts to encourage responsible behavior. It is one of the primary lines of effort under this administration's national strategy to secure 5G. Building upon the recommendations established by the Prague Proposal and the National Strategy to Secure 5G, CISA seeks to advance the development and deployment of secure and resilient 5G infrastructure guided by 3 core competencies, including risk management, stakeholder engagement, and technical assistance. In response, it has developed the CISA 5G strategy, which includes 5 strategic objectives: support 5G policy and standards development by emphasizing security and resilience, expand situational awareness of 5G supply chain risk and promote security measures, promote with stakeholders and strengthen and secure existing infrastructure to support 5G developments, encourage innovation in the 5G marketplace to foster trusted 5G vendors, and to analyze potential 5G use and share information on risk management strategies. Even at their most basic level, cybersecurity threats are not bound by international borders. The track records of our adversaries have certainly made it clear that they do not differentiate their malign behavior in cyberspace based on where one country ends and another begins. That said, our unique national capabilities and talents give us the opportunity to learn from one another and grow stronger together. Cybersecurity inherently is and must be a transnational issue, and our agility, resilience, and certainly perseverance in responding to cyber threats will improve only if our collective awareness about the threats themselves improves. It is imperative that together we continue to encourage responsible behavior in the cyber domain and diligently, conscientiously, and unreservedly oppose those who would seek to disrupt our networks and systems. I believe we are all well on our way to building a shared understanding of the importance of maintaining a robust cybersecurity paradigm. And even more importantly, we as a community of nations of the world are on our way to leveraging our respective strengths and compensating for our respective opportunity areas in a manner that produces a cohesive, effective, and impactful partnership. Thank you all once again for your dedication to this issue and for your attention today. Thank you.
We are very grateful for the Secretary's comments today. Certainly set the stage for remarks we'll hear now from our distinguished panel. I'm particularly grateful for those leaders that I have met in the past when I've attended the Doha Forum. The Doha Forum, of course, is one of our partners and co-hosts for this webinar today, but some very impressive individuals who are joining us today who give leadership in the area of cybersecurity in Qatar. Mr. Ambassador Mutlaq Al-Qahtani has held the post of Special Envoy of the Foreign Ministry for Counterterrorism and Mediation of Conflict Resolution since 2016. Dr. Qahtani holds extensive expertise in the fields of counterterrorism, money laundering, counterterror finance, has taken a leadership role in introducing CPVE initiatives to the region. Dr. Al-Qahtani holds a PhD in public international law. He was awarded the Ambassador of Peace Award by the Universal Peace Federation. So we're so pleased to have you join us today, Mr. Al-Qahtani and Mr. Ambassador. We very much look forward to your remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Congressman. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for organizing this important event. And thank you for choosing this topic, because I think this topic is important to all of us. The national efforts in cybersecurity is important and is indispensable. But regardless how sophisticated, robust, and good these regulations are, I think in the cybersecurity, I think in my personal opinion, it's not enough. And what's more important is given the nature of cyber security, and the cyber space, which goes beyond the domain of internal affairs, I would like to focus my shorter presentation on the international law of cybersecurity. I think we, as I said, regardless if we have a national or domestic regulations or laws, that in itself is not enough because of the nature of the problem. And a single state cannot tackle this phenomenon by itself. So we need to have to tackle this through international cooperation and through international law. If we go and visit and review the role of international law of cybersecurity, which regulates the international relations and the international cooperation of cybersecurity, including the issue of jurisdiction, including the applicable rules in cybersecurity and our collective security. It's regrettable to say that international law faces a lot of challenges with respect to the cybersecurity. Well, number one, there are countries which we call them the cyber superpowers, if I may. They tend to resist the codification of international law of cybersecurity. They are resistant not only to the codification, but they are quite resistant to any international agreement that's bind all countries and to become a source of international law. We see these countries tend to work in norms, tend to adopt a code of conduct, and even code of conducts are not acceptable by a lot of countries. Maybe one of the reasons because those who initiated the code of conducts are not necessarily popular in the international arena. We see also, and we don't know why, but we see a lot of countries are also not only reluctant to codify international law related to cybersecurity, but also extremely reluctant to pronounce themselves and to comment and to reflect and to contribute to the progress of international law and cybersecurity. I think, as I said, also many countries, most countries, they want to discuss to some extent norms as opposed to rules and principles, and to discuss norms that not necessarily binding. But making a reference to these challenges that facing international law of cybersecurity does not mean that international law cannot tackle this phenomenon. We understand when the United Nations Charter was adopted in 1946, there was no reference to nuclear weapons, for instance, and maybe there are weapons that we don't know as we speak. But if those who are familiar with the International Court of Justice jurisprudence, when made a reference to in its advisory opinion to the nuclear weapons, when they said the use of force applies also to nuclear weapons. We have, unfortunately, yes, we have some sectorial and regional instruments like the Budapest Agreement of 2001, like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Agreement in 2009, and also the African Union Act in 2013. These sectorial and regional documents or instruments are not holistic or comprehensive in their approach, and they only relate to certain countries and only relate to certain issues and not necessarily cover all the issues. So that's why, for that reason, I think it's quite indispensable to work on a more comprehensive international agreement or a treaty or a convention to tackle and to deal with the cybersecurity. I think those countries who are not necessarily supportive of this approach, I think they have to understand that it's in their interest ultimately to accept such thing. We understand we're not talking about the outer space. We are talking about the cyberspace, which is now not only state actors are operating in, but non-state actors, company, etc., including terrorist organizations and terrorist individuals are also are playing a role in this. I think it's in the interest of our collective security to work together and to work on a comprehensive agreement that's behind us. We need to tackle one of the issues, which is the issue of jurisdiction. Many countries have a problem with that. We need to have a monitoring mechanism to monitor these activities. More importantly, we need a permanent or a robust dispute settlement mechanism to tackle disputes over cybersecurity. I personally expect that in the light of the recent development in our region and the recent development in the world, including what happened in the United States and elsewhere, that countries and decision makers start to feel that there is a need to codify and to put in place a comprehensive convention to deal with cybersecurity. I hope next year we'll witness something in that regard. I hope countries like United States will take the lead on this, and Qatar has been quite vocal on this, and His Highness already indicated the desire of Qatar to organize and to work with the international community over a comprehensive international agreement to tackle this. I think we have to do this, and we have to do this as quick as possible, and for the interest of all of us. And this is just to, in a nutshell, my intervention, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Qahtani. We very much appreciate your remarks, extremely well received, and be very important for legislators, parliamentarians throughout the globe, particularly all of us in the United States as well. We value your input and your relationship. Now we'd like to introduce Mr. Patrick Alcorn. He's a senior manager for SAS in cybersecurity. I've been engaged and involved with SAS, the largest software analytical company in the world, since the early 2000s. And they have certainly played a key role in assisting us in all of our forums throughout the globe. They've traveled with us and have participated in a number of our webinars and issues related to illicit finance, cybersecurity, and 5G, and trade-based money laundering. So many issues that we tackle as part of our presentations. So, Mr. Alcorn, we thank you for joining us. You are one in that organization that provides the creative solutions to give in-depth knowledge and awareness of advanced analytical, cybersecurity, insider threats, fraud, waste, and abuse domains. So we thank you for your expertise, and we welcome your comments today, sir.
So good morning, everybody. I've been in the information security field and analytics field for approximately 30 years, working with the SAS Institute for 18 years of those. Today, I'm going to do an overview of how human artificial intelligence teams can mitigate risks due to the convergence of technologies in the oil and gas sector. What I'm going to try to accomplish here is talk about how both not only the technology, but the risk management frameworks that are enacted by oil and gas operations, or really any critical infrastructure, need to be updated, and then how this ties into legislations. My role is a solutions architect, so I not only look at the technology involved to accommodate these things, but I have to also look at policies, internal policies for corporations, as well as does the national law support the incorporations of both the monitoring and the remediation of these type of threats. So three key things. You need an AI human team to counter the threats because of the complexity of the environment we're working in, especially in the oil and gas industry. Need to create a cross-functional team. You cannot operate in silos. Physical security has to communicate with cybersecurity, has to communicate with insider threat capabilities, so you can mitigate these very real threats. And then finally, each one of these has a legislation component. You cannot gather the information illegally. You cannot apprehend threats unless there's laws in place to do so. So we'll try to bring those into context. All right, first of all, why are we talking about humans and AIs working together? Three key areas. If you look at the industry literature out there right now, every major university, major companies such as Microsoft has recognized the fact that AIs working by themselves are effective. Humans working by themselves have effectiveness, but the true power lies in the integration of these two teams. Next is that the threat surface that you're trying to manage, especially in the oil and gas industry, is huge. The technologies, the people, the physical layout is just too complex and diverse to manage. And finally, and very importantly, the threat actors that are trying to penetrate your defenses are actively using artificial intelligence as well. This is a quick slide just to look at a representative oil and gas lifecycle network of processes. So everything from exploration at the far left to fuels distribution have critical points which can be disrupted by external and internal threats. Let's take a look at a scenario. Now, this scenario that we're going to review with some capabilities is based upon real technologies. It's not a science fiction movie or a Netflix theme out there. It's real technologies being brought together in an innovative, powerful fashion to mitigate these threats. Key things to remember: these technologies are used by both a cybersecurity team and a physical team, and it requires real-time collaboration. Threats do not wait. If you have to wait, the threats can succeed. Let's look at quick architecture. I notice that I have a geofence threat, an insider threat that's being carried out, and abnormal network behavior. In normal systems, I have possibly 3 different teams looking at these, and these teams would have to communicate manually to combine these together to realize that there's a common threat occurring here. By interjecting an AI layer into this, the AI is able to bring up the connections automatically for my joint security team to handle the threats. So let's take a look at what the physical threat would look like. I have either closed circuit television or a drone that has activated a geofence threat. Something has happened in a critical facility that spawned this monitoring activity. If I stop here, the streaming data has indicated that a foreign national registered car has entered the perimeter of my secure facility. Not only has the streaming data indicated the license, but the foreign nationals have cell phones that were ideally legally registered upon entrance in the country. That data was transferred to my critical infrastructure security teams. So if one of these comes into the area, they know about it. Coupled with this threat is an IT administrator that's entering the facility here that is not normally accessed to this facility, and he's conducting behaviors that are not normal. So the AI has coupled this information together so I can look at all of these threats combined. I want to look at this insider threat, and I'm linked to his insider detection profile, and I notice that he is ranked for insider threat relative to his peer groups using AI and analytics in the background. And today his activity is spiked. If I looked at his e-communications, again, legally collected, I can say there's several communications that are concerning. One in particular, that he has notice of a rent default. That indicates that he may be subject to foreign influence on financial grounds. Finally, he has entered the facility, and I want to be able to take a look at what his activity is relative to a device he has accessed. This device is an operational technology device that's demonstrating abnormal network behavior in the device. So it's scanning for an Oracle database. It has excessive data transfer to the internal device, and it has excessive data to an external threat. All this indicates in the system that this is a combined threat. Combining this with an auto recommender, it says if it's a geofence security event, that's recommended armed security response. Insider threat, immediately lock out the account. And the high risk device, just block communication. If you turn off the device, this could cause problems in your infrastructure. So the foundation of this, again, is a robust risk management framework and a scoring taxonomy, as well as legislation to support this activity. Again, this is a summary of technology that's real and available, coupled with your policies, technologies, and legislation that can be enacted right now.
Thank you, Mr. Alcorn. Are you complete with your presentation?
Yes, I am.
Well, that was absolutely remarkable. The capabilities that are there for every country, the technology that SAS provides, I think is extraordinary. So we really appreciate your perspective and insight into this and your offer of assistance with us today. I would like to introduce now Her Excellency Reem Al-Mansoori. She's a member of the Shura Council in the State of Qatar. She is also the Assistant Undersecretary of Digital Society in the Development of Ministry of Transport and Communications, where she is leading the delivery of TASMU, which is Qatar's Smart Country Platform. With expertise that spans more than 2 decades of experience in digital transformation in Qatar's government, Her Excellency Al-Mansoori is spearheading some of the largest initiatives and programs that continue to make a substantial impact on Qatar's technological advances. Ms. Al-Mansoori is a MSc in Computational Intelligence in the University of Plymouth in the UK, and has an executive MBA from HSC Paris with a focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. We're so honored to have you with us today, Your Excellency, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you very much for this introduction. Good morning, gentlemen. I wish we have ladies with us today. As the Shura Council member of the State of Qatar and Under Secretary of Digital Society Development at Qatar Ministry of Transport and Communication, I'm proudly leading Qatar's efforts towards building a smart and secure society and knowledge-based economy. As Qatar progresses on its journey to transforming into a knowledge-based economy through leveraging advanced innovation and technology, ensuring an appropriate cybersecurity and data governance measure are a critical success factor to achieve our national and smart Qatar goals. Preserving the data integrity of high-powered cloud-based platform, technologies that drive the global connectivity and solutions that affordable access points, and managing information flow and processing. These are key considerations in our cybersecurity agenda. The role of national regulators and specialist agencies to set robust standards for cyber protection, establish risk evaluation framework, assurance measures and risk mitigation strategies is a key in managing national cyber threats. We must collectively also ensure that our community has necessary awareness and understanding to identify potential risk, therefore, ensuring timely intervention and digital trust, establishing best-in-class legislative and governance mechanisms to drive this effort, involving all stakeholders and ensuring a holistic approach battling cybercrime and its threats. It's a critical responsibility we bear. Thank you for hosting me today on this platform to shed my light on what has become a very relevant subject in today's global landscape. I would like to spend some time on talking about specific cybersecurity legislation and efforts taken in the State of Qatar. Qatar has been working to update its cybersecurity legislation in accordance with the latest development in the industry in an effort to protect the country's cyberspace. Given that information security issues cross the geographical boundaries of a single country, and in an effort to overcome such challenges, the State of Qatar continues to make efforts to strengthen cooperation with its counterparts around the world to create an open, secure digital space. The State of Qatar is an associate member of the International Privacy Association and has also participated in the global network of privacy regulators, where international coordination takes place regarding the protection of personal data across the borders of different countries. Qatar's laws on protecting the privacy of personal data is consistent with the European laws and legislation such as the General Data Protection Regulation. Also, Qatar has been accepted as a member of the International Common Criteria Recognition Agreement and started the second phase, which is building the necessary capabilities to issue technical examination certificates. As part of the cybersecurity executive action, Qatar has carried out a risk assessment of more than 100 vital institutions in the country, including a capacity assessment of these institutions. Following the assessment, the country created a roadmap for these entities to build their cyber capabilities. This led to the establishment of a cybersecurity center at the Ministry of Interior and the Cybersecurity Division at the Ministry of Transport and Communication. The role of the center is to detect the cyber crimes and investigate them to turn the violators to court. The cyber risk poses serious threats to governments, economies, business, and individuals. Governments are increasingly investing in improving their cybersecurity protocols as the frequency of attacks rises. Qatar is not far from this topic, as it was itself a victim of a cyber attack on the Qatar news agency, which triggered a GCC crisis thing until now. Thus, it is important for Qatar, similar to other countries, to reevaluate their cybersecurity readiness and come up with new strategies to cope with new threats. On 16th of September 2014, the Qatari government decreed a cybercrime prevention law number 14 of 2014 in an effort to increase the tool of combating cybercrimes. The law imposes many sanctions and several penalties for offenses committed through the internet, IT networks, computer, and other related crimes. The legislation is aimed at safeguarding the country's technological infrastructure and strengthening the cybersecurity within Qatar. The law has provisions to fight most forms of online crimes and has strict penalties for criminal actions. Then there is another law, number 13 of 2016, which is the Data Protection Law. It grants certain rights to individuals, which include the right to give or withdraw consent to any processing of their personal data. An individual also has the right to review any of their personal data being stored and to request any modification or correction where the information is inaccurate. To protect these rights, the Data Protection Law places a heavy burden on the data controllers and processors to ensure that the personal data is handled with care and is duly protected from any leakage or loss or unauthorized disclosure of data. I will share some information about Qatar's position in global ranking. Qatar ranked first in the Arab world and third in the 2019 National Cybersecurity Index, the NCISI, issued by the Academy of Electronic Governance in the Republic of Estonia, which showed Qatar's superiority in this field and its 30th place in the world out of 140 countries surveyed. Qatar also has ranked 17th place in the Global Cybersecurity Index, up from 25th place in the International Telecommunication Union in March 2019. Qatar has developed procedures that ensure the efficiency and readiness of immediate information across the state institutions to deal with the cyber attack. Thank you again. And later, my colleague, Mr. Al-Hashemi, will shed the light on the role of readiness of cybersecurity to confront the cyber piracy attacks on Qatar. So I would like really to thank you for this opportunity. And if there is any question later on, I can take it.
Thank you, Excellency. Very good comments. We deeply appreciate your role and participation in this forum. We have had a question that's come up relative to Mr. Alcorn's statement that all the data that he received was done legally. Could you help the listeners understand that process? And that was the question of how that could be done.
Okay, can you hear me appropriately here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what you have is a connection of both your risk management framework, policies, procedures, and controls. Those controls are set up and vetted with your legal team to assess the context or how that information is collected and what is the reason, okay? If you're operating on an ad hoc fashion and see this threat and you have to go to the legislature and have a ruling provided on the data, that's going to take time. If you've already pre-vetted the process and allowed this to occur, it's allowed. Now, their exceptions are made for critical infrastructure. On a normal business, more than likely, depending on your nationality, such collection will not be allowed. If this is critical infrastructure or part of your national security, those exceptions are allowed. So it's conditional, but in this instance, because it was critical infrastructure, the legal framework was in place to allow the collection of this information, but it doesn't hold true on all cases.
Yes, point well made. We, of course, are challenged back in 2013 relative to the Snowden revelations and data sharing and the ability to qualify the access to the data. And of course, there was a lot of misinformation regarding the transfer and of the data and the access to data. And frankly, that's what began our forums. I was asked by the leadership of our Congress to bring together, particularly the Europeans, who had found great concern in what they understood at the time to be an abuse of civil liberties and privacies. So I think what is important for the legislators is to know the policies, the legislation that can be constructed that provides a safe harbor, a pathway to allow the important critical access to data. And data is really the key component. And it's going to be even more so, as we all know, as data becomes more prevalent through artificial intelligence and through the access and use of 5G. So if you would, any other further comments on providing the type of legislation that would be helpful to parliamentarians, what they could provide to give guidance to them to enable this flow of proper information in their country.
Again, it's important for the security providers to work with the legislators so the legislators fully understand the threat and the information required, as well as the controls in place to protect that information. So a security technologist such as myself would provide the context and the protections, and the legislator could work with us to produce the appropriate legislation. It's based upon a transfer of knowledge and critical need for defense.
Yes, sir, you're exactly right. I recall going down in our own crypt, which is our intelligence unit, and read the accounts of 50 different attacks that were prevented because we had adequate information and the ability to facilitate data transfers within a country and among countries. And what we did find out is that our governments, particularly our executive branches, were working very closely together, but the legislative bodies were not as fully aware of this process. And that is really why we began and launched this effort to bring in the best experts to address these issues, whether it's information sharing or illicit finance or cyber security or trade-based money laundering or a number of issues that we seek to address each time. So your thoughtful reflection and assistance and guidance to parliamentarians on this important access to data is really very helpful. I'd like to introduce now the Associate Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Mr. Richard DiZinno. We thank you, sir, for your leadership. You've been in the Department of Justice. Now you're serving there as Associate Deputy Attorney General. You've served in the U.S. Senate as Chief Counsel there for National Security, also in the Office of District of Columbia. You have a very distinguished background, and I thank you for your focus on these issues and the guidance that you can provide to legislators today.
Thank you, Congressman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me here today. As the Congressman indicated, I'm currently at DOJ, but not speaking in my capacity as a DOJ employee today. He mentioned my background as a staffer in the United States Senate. I was a Chief Counsel for National Security and Crime, working for the Judiciary Committee, and have some familiarity with the legislative efforts being conducted in the United States Congress right now, and thought it'd be helpful to give an overview of some of the issues that the United States Congress is facing on this timely topic. So I thought it might be useful to frame that discussion by providing folks the overview of where we have political agreement and disagreement in this country. And I would categorize agreement and disagreement in three general buckets. One is, generally speaking, on cybersecurity issues relating to the federal government, meaning federal infrastructure, how the federal government conducts its own internal business. I think you can generally find wide bipartisan agreement on political efforts on both sides of our political aisles, of members trying to address those issues, meaning we have a significant amount of interest in members trying to make sure that the government is resilient in its own internal operations and trying to find legislative tools to address that resiliency and to make sure we're doing everything that we can from a legislative standpoint to address those issues. Second, there is general, again, bipartisan consensus on how the federal government should interact with state and local governments. As you all know, we have a system of federalism where we have a national federal law that overlays on top of our state and local laws, and many of the state and local laws that are implemented, we have at the federal level, depending on what the issue is, sometimes no jurisdiction to interfere with state or local law. Oftentimes, federal law will preempt or supersede state law, but generally speaking, there are a few areas where there's agreement on how the federal government should interact. Mostly that has to do with law enforcement operations, pure investigations dealing with cybersecurity intrusions by criminal actors. Those are mostly led by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You heard, obviously, Secretary Wolf talk at length, and the Department of Homeland Security, through its agency, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, which he mentioned, handles, as he mentioned, the issues of protecting domestic critical infrastructure and working with those various critical infrastructure sectors. He mentioned oil and natural gas, mass transit, sensitive government sites, and the telecommunications sector. Obviously, there is a mix of private elements to those sectors and public elements, meaning publicly controlled or government controlled. Where they're government controlled, that facilitation and cooperation is a lot easier. Where there's private control over those critical sectors, that is more difficult, but our government is endeavoring to make significant relationships with those private actors as well, to be able to communicate in a fulsome way, not disclosing information that can't be disclosed because it's classified or law enforcement sensitive or whatever the case may be, but giving a pass back of information that's enough to allow private sector actors to make proper decisions to allow those critical infrastructure components to be protective of our national security. And finally, the Secretary focused on election security as well. And so that's sort of the second bucket where, again, we have some bipartisan agreement. Where we have very little bipartisan agreement is in the private sphere. And Her Excellency talked about data privacy in her country. Our European colleagues are obviously well familiar with GDPR. We are struggling here in the United States to enact the comprehensive national data privacy regulation that would supersede or preempt all the various state laws. California has enacted legislation, other states have enacted legislation. And so for private industry, that has become a patchwork that has been difficult to reconcile across the United States. That remains an issue. Data breach notification is also a very difficult political issue to resolve. And of course, lawful access and encryption. We've had that debate for well over 40 years here in the United States, and there is still no consensus on whether or not the federal government should legally mandate law enforcement to access encrypted systems pursuant to proper legal process supplied by a law enforcement entity. Quickly, I just want to move on to talk about one of the relevant topics in the cyberspace realm, and that is the establishment, organization, and conduct of what's known as the Cyberspace Solarium Commission. This commission was established in the 2009 fiscal year National Defense Authorization Act. The design of this commission was meant to develop a consensus approach to defending the United States in cyberspace. The commission finished its final report in March of 2020, and as a result of that report, or included in that report, were over 54 legislative recommendations for Congress to consider, 80 total recommendations, some non-legislative. But as we, the commissioners worked with Congress to try and incorporate some of those recommendations into actionable legislation. And through our annual National Defense Authorization Act that Congress typically passes, the commission worked very, very hard over the past 6 or more months to include some of these suggestions into actual provisions that are being considered right now in the National Defense Authorization Act, which is likely to pass Congress within the next week or so. And one other thing that I'll note is we recently passed the Internet of Things Cybersecurity Improvement Act. Again, that has very limited in the sense that it deals with only the federal government. I won't go over the details of that bill due to time, but I'll just say that this represents a pretty significant milestone in the sense that I believe this is the first Internet of Things, a legislative item that's been passed in the United States Congress and signed into law. So we may see more on the horizon, but as I mentioned in the first section of the remarks, this only has to do with government conduct and the safety and security of the Internet of Things as it relates to government systems. As you move into the private sector, it becomes more and more politically difficult, at least in this country, to gain consensus on how to deal with those issues. And so with that, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Mr. DiZinno. Very well said. And I would say your remarks are certainly important for legislators in that you have provided substantial guidance to senators relative to these issues and help construct the legislation that we're addressing today. I do have a couple questions I'd like to have been brought to us. One is, how do you get governments comfortable to share international cybersecurity systems and clouds to be shared together? Any of you would like to comment on that?
So one of the things that I've seen in my consulting services is that the international cooperation against drug interdiction provides a cooperative model of how information can be shared and how mutual people can trust each other on that. I always look for precedents and basis of trust, and I would say that could serve as a potential model for the sharing of cybersecurity information. Just one of the things that I've seen in my travels.
Yes, sir. Any other comments on that?
I'll step in. I agree completely with Patrick's comments. I think if you look at some of the more successful international counter cybercrime events we've seen over the last several years, We look at what Europol has done in particular. About 2 or 3 years ago, Europol crushed many of the major criminal marketplaces. The criminal world in cyberspace has never quite recovered. They've morphed, they've changed, they've continued to grow, but that had real long-term impact. And it's an example, again, of international cooperation in this space that really worked.
Very good. Any other comments, Mr. DiZinno? Or any of you all from Qatar?
I would just add that in spite of the previous comments, I think from a national security standpoint, members and some in the National Security Council are wary of sharing information and are cognizant of trying to design systems or protocols to ensure the integrity of whatever systems are shared and with the appropriate international partners.
Very good. We'll do one other question. The Congressman is on his way to be with us. How do you see the reconciliation of the political governmental spying cyber attacks and the green cybersecurity global law? Anyone would like to comment on that? I think we will not have a comment on that. I cannot respond to it. I do not have the proper answer for that one. I think the question here is, what other? Well, we have Congressman Rouzer now. Let's tune into him. Congressman Rouzer is connecting. He's my colleague in the United States Congress, a fellow North Carolinian. More importantly, we were both students of the Honorable Senator Jesse Helms. He worked for Senator Helms. I was on Senator Helms' board for over a decade of his foundation. And I would say that we were both impacted significantly by the role of the model of the man who was chairman of our Foreign Relations Committee for so many years. Distinguished, great leader in our country. Congressman Rouzer was also a member of the North Carolina State Senate, of which I was a member. We followed each other around a little bit, but he is a great friend and a great leader and very knowledgeable on these issues of cybersecurity. So thank you, Congressman Rouzer, for being with us today.
Thank you, Robert. It's great to be with you and all the distinguished members that are part of this group in this forum today. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you. And I think often about our former boss and friend and colleague, Senator Helms, and certainly helped to shape my thinking on a number of matters, and obviously yours as well. And really appreciate the opportunity I had to serve with you here in the U.S. Congress. And you were doing great work then, and you're continuing to do great work now. So, Robert, great to be with you. I thought what I would do is share a couple of thoughts, overall, and I go back to my days when I was a student at NC State University. I was actually an ag econ, and chemistry major at NC State, but I was in a program over in Prague, the Czech Republic, the summer of 1994, and that wasn't long after the fall of the wall. And of course, when I was growing up, I'm 48 years old. Certainly, those my age and older, we all grew up basically under the guise of and under the shadow, I guess you might say, of the Cold War. And the dominant players, obviously, at that time were America and the Soviet Union. And I remember as a kid, being told where to go in case there was an attack on the homeland, and how to get under your desk and all that good stuff. And of course, from all that, you kind of thought, you always heard about Armageddon, and you always thought, well, Armageddon would be bullets and missiles and nuclear. But as time has evolved and things have changed in the world, and because of our interdependence on technology, really cybersecurity and cyber, all things cyber, are really that's really the new threat in many ways. And one of the things that I learned from my experience in Prague, I was in this program that summer. There were 60 students and about 10 of us from America, 50 from the former communist bloc. My roommate grew up in Romania, and of course that 94 wasn't long after the fall of the wall. We were the first opportunity that anybody from the in that program in particular, that we were the first opportunity that any of them had to interact with Americans, and it was very eye-opening. Life behind the Iron Curtain was very different, obviously, than life in America. And all those students, they told me how they longed to one day be able to get to America, and if they couldn't get to America, how they longed for one day to be able to have the opportunities that we have in America. So I came away from that experience, came away from that summer with a couple of thoughts. Predominantly was, if you don't have the right political systems in place, nothing else works very well either. And I think that's, the overall challenge, that we face today. We live in a world of good and evil. It's very much a major component. Sometimes we don't want to admit it, but it's true. And as we become more and more dependent upon technology, we become much more dependent upon each other, interconnected with each other through technology. Cybersecurity gets more and more important for all of us, not just as nations, but as individuals. Because if you think about it, your entire life is basically interconnected digitally, whether it's your paycheck, healthcare, electricity. We rely on all these networks and digital devices, basically transferring all kinds of data. And we've seen what a pandemic will do to our economies. We've seen what a pandemic, will do to everyday normal life, and the changes that have resulted from this COVID-19 pandemic. Well, if that's the case with a pandemic, imagine how much more significant and severe cyber attacks would be on everyday life. So I think this is a major point of emphasis, is that we have to work together to put together a framework of deterrence. You get more whatever you incentivize, or if you ignore a problem, the enemies basically view that as their green light to continue to pursue their nefarious activities. So you have to react quickly. You have to react with agility. And that's not something that government in general is very, very good at. Being quick and agile is not an inherent trait of the federal government, at least not in America. So, as my colleague Robert knows very, very well. And the fact of the matter is, I think we have to work very closely and jointly to come up with a really good strategic plan and plans of deterrence, so that if any one person is hit in any regard, there's a very quick and decisive and agile reaction to that. Otherwise, if you don't respond, you're just given the green light to do more. It's just like the rioting in streets in some American cities that we've seen over the last 8-9 months. And the fact of the matter is, where you don't have a police presence, or where the police presence is not allowed to be there, you have more strife. Again, you get more of whatever you incentivize. So The bottom line of all this, digital connectivity has brought us a tremendous amount of economic growth, new inventions, but the more connections we have digitally with others and throughout the global economy, it certainly creates more opportunities for our adversaries as well. And so this is obviously a continual battle. In Congress in 2019, the National Defense Authorization Act chartered what you all know as the U.S. Cyberspace Solarian Commission to help address some of these challenges. We've got some language in this year's NDAA. That stands for the National Defense Authorization Act, by the way, NDAA. We've got some language in this year's NDAA that establishes the National Cyber Director and the Executive Office of the President. So we're taking some steps that need to be taken to address this issue long term and raise awareness of it and do what we need to do to protect our country and of course, to help be a leader in this effort. I think, when you really boil it down, the economies of the future clearly are going to be grounded and steeped in technology and even more technology that's technological advances that we haven't thought about yet. Certainly artificial intelligence is probably one of the next big waves. And whoever masters that the quickest, I think, is going to have a huge leg up. And so all these things present, I think, a lot of opportunities, but with each opportunity and additional opportunity that are created, you're going to have a lot more challenges as well. And that's inherent in anything. But when you really look at the total picture here, I think what we're really after, I think, is what a common goal for everybody is. You want to have peace and prosperity. And certainly, it's my experience and my observation that freedom and prosperity go hand in hand. And of course, you're not going to have either if we don't all work together to ensure that we're doing everything possible to stay ahead of the curve on this cyber front. And so I just really commend you, Mr. Chairman, for pulling this together, and I really commend all those who are participants for their willingness to have an exchange of ideas and really focus on the common elements that help to not only make our individual country stronger and more secure, but also our ability to work together to battle the many different and varied evil forces out there, particularly in the realm of cyber and financial transactions and all the different aspects that are involved in the digital age, so to speak. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you again, and I think this is an area where there's an opportunity to really build a lot of really great relationships, improve upon the relationships that we have, and build new relationships all around the world focused on cybersecurity and the common threats and solutions that we can bring to the table.
Thank you, Congressman Rouzer. Again, a very thoughtful and pragmatic analysis of the issues that we're seeking to address today. You sit in a position like parliamentarians around the globe who are looking at real lives of real people and how's this going to affect us. And you certainly brought that into clarity and focus today. Senator Helms, our mentor, would be very proud of my friend today and the service that you lend for North Carolina and for our country, and that in reality for the world. So thank you, Congressman Rouzer, for joining us and for your friendship and for your contribution with us today.
Great to be with you.
I would like now to introduce a very distinguished gentleman who's giving leadership in the World Cup 2022. His name is Khalid Al-Hashemi. He is a cybersecurity officer with Qatar 2022 Cybersecurity Unit. He earned his bachelor's degree in computer studies in the United Kingdom in work in industrial and communication sectors for 7 years in the information technology and cybersecurity operation. We do thank you for your leadership, sir, today, for the important role that you play in that very critical event that we all look forward to. And we appreciate the information that you'll be able to provide to our parliamentarians throughout the globe. Mr. Al-Hashemi.
Thank you, Congressman, for hosting me for this session. Actually, I will continue talking about the efforts for State of Qatar during previous years and for the World Cup. Actually, the State of Qatar has enacted cybercrime law in order to create a safe and secure cyberspace. Law number 14 on combating cybercrime actually consists of 54 articles and 5 sections criminating all forms of cybersecurity threats in cyberspace. Whereas Section 2 of the law criminalizes the crime pertaining to hacking information systems, software, network, and electronic sites. Beside content crime, electronic forgery and fraud, electronic transaction, card offenses, and infringement of intellectual property rights. Section 3, the law describes the evidence and investigation procedures through the confirm human practice properly and avoid encroaching the right through the investigation procedures or methods of collecting evidence. Cybercrime law actually compels government bodies and organizations to protect their information systems, electronic site, information network, and electronic information through taking all necessary measures and prompt reporting to competent authorities cooperating with them. In addition, the law obligates service providers to retain data and presenting them to the competent authorities in order to collect evidence when requested to judicial authorities and reveal the retailing of any criminal act. The law also allows international cooperation aiming at cyberspace protection, as international cooperation has a significant role in building cybersecurity. Due to rapid evolving technology recently, cybercrime has been impacted considerably. Thus, we in State of Qatar are constant review of the law to ensure keeping pace with such development. Also, we have earlier conducted a workshop with the European Council to engage their expertise in drafting Budapest Convention and taking their observation into consideration. Also, away from that, in addition to that, combating cybercrime law, Ministry of Transport and Communication issued the National Information Assurance Policies specifies a high-level information classification methodology for all government entities in Qatar, which allow appropriate value to be achieved, risks to be determined, and appropriate protection to be applied. Also, at the operational level for the World Cup Cybersecurity Unit developed Qatar 2022 cybersecurity framework to support the legislation requirement in data and technology protection. Framework to support the legislation requirement and technology protection based on global policies and standards. With the contributions representative from government, including the public, prosecution, and civil society, universities, information security communities, subject matter experts, and consultants working in various sectors. All these are aimed to safeguard the critical national services supporting World Cup 2022. That framework which we have developed contains 14 capabilities, such like governance, cloud security, data privacy that identify the relevant legal and regulatory framework as set by international, national, and sector standard legislation practices for mandatory compliance. As an example, it has to ensure compliance with the legal binding regulation for protecting personally identifiable information as per the Qatar privacy law and international regulations such as the GDPR. In addition to the legislation consideration, the framework support entities in Qatar to implement the processes, controls, and technologies required to build sustainable capabilities which aligned to business goal, to support entities to increase current security level for the IT services to the accepted level based on that framework. Also, cybersecurity unit actually mapped all these capabilities 14 with the industrial standards, then developed a plan to assist the entities against this framework. Then provide a roadmap for each entity separately with a recommendation to fill the gaps and reach acceptable level. Also, the unit keep following with these entities in country to provide also the consultation to achieve the goal before the World Cup 2022. The state of Qatar actually during the past years noticed increase in cyber attack, which shows that the importance to understand and to have shared responsibility to protect critical national infrastructure. Cybersecurity framework had a big development effort targeting increased cybersecurity capabilities for that entities before the World Cup. Also, this actually the effort for this framework is not limited to the World Cup, but it will be used later and can be applied and used anywhere else. As an initiative related to improve the skills of people, we consider the investing in developing the human resources capabilities as most important priority for the state of Qatar. In order to become at the highest level of efficiency and to implement a global cybersecurity standard and technologies utilization, and to achieve also Qatar Vision 2030 in the human development part. Also, cybersecurity launched the cyber prevention training program. It's a national-wide initiative targeted to knowledge workers and IT professionals. This program split into 17 different courses to enhance Qatar cyber readiness and resilience to prevent the nation from cyber attack. The program accommodates more than 50,000 into training tracks that are awareness, foundation, and for the cyber specialist. Another program also MOTC had Ministry of Telecom and Communication, Transport and Communication has taken as an initiative to facilitate and conduct national exercises titled Know Yourself. This is for the 8th version this year. The exercise is an extension of the national cyber exercises that have begun in 2013. It's an update of the serious national cyber defense, which began in 2018. What distinguishes these exercises is the large number of entities involved locally, and they focus on measuring the national level of the entities and ability to understand their systems and way to protect them from cyber attack. It's worth actually to noting that the state of Qatar considered one of the leading countries in conducting national cyber exercises, which have been prized in many local and international forums. Congressman, that's what I have about the efforts up to now. So thank you again for hosting this here.
Thank you, Mr. Khalid Al-Hashemi. We really appreciate your remarks and leadership, and we look forward to 2022. I'd like to introduce now Mr. Jake Norwood, my friend, who's the head of global head of at Citibank Cyber Security Fusion Centers. He leads the efforts relative to their intelligence analysis for military, for cybersecurity, for federal and military agencies, for over 100 corporations that he advises. We thank you, sir, for your joining us today. Mr. Norwood is going to give us a wrap up of what we've heard today, an analysis, his perspective, and also perhaps field some questions that he has come up with during this webinar today. So thank you, Jake, for joining us. We look forward to your analysis and your comments.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll do my best not to disappoint. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, respected guests. A couple of things. First, the Congressman gave me a fantastic introduction. I want to add that part of what I do is the lead for Cyber Fusion for Citigroup, is that I coordinate the activities of over 20 different teams, over 1,000, and by some counts as many as 3,000 different personnel, to bring these capabilities together in order to protect Citigroup's network, and by extension to protect the global financial system due to Citigroup's systemic importance as critical infrastructure. So what are some of the themes that we saw today? We heard a lot about risk, and specifically the adoption of risk frameworks in order to understand that risk and try to combat that risk. A lot of mention, unsurprisingly, for this form of legislation, and that this legislation should be not just reactive or not just punitive, but also that it should be a deterrent, that it should be preventative to the extent possible. We talked about the threat. The threat is borderless. The threat is organized. In some cases, the threat is overwhelming, and certainly the threat is evolving. And I want to talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. Specifically, I want to talk about getting in front of the threat and really understanding what the threat is. So I think back to something a couple of years ago before I worked for Citigroup that I experienced. At the time, I was working in a private investigative capacity. We were helping companies that were compromised by ransomware, which is a constant plague now, recover their information and in some cases pay ransoms. Now, paying ransoms is not something that at any point I recommend anyone does. Please don't. But on occasion that is done. So the company that I was working for at the time, we would help facilitate that, be a bagman, if you will, and paying for ransoms. So one such company was compromised, and we went to convert the U.S. currency into Bitcoin so that we could pay the ransom and help recover this client's data. However, the Bitcoin broker, the cryptocurrency broker that we were working with, did not move very quickly, and there was a ticking clock, a deadline on this ransomware payment that if we didn't pay it within a week, that the fine would double, or not the fine, sorry, that the ransom, that the extortion would double. So we submitted this money. We're coming up on about 48 hours to deadline. The money has not yet converted into cryptocurrency, and so we cannot yet pay the ransom. So we quickly sent the money again through a different broker that we thought would be faster. Incidentally, both of these payments hit at the same time, and we paid the bad guy twice. As we were negotiating or conversing through an internet chat with the bad guy said the following. He or she said, "I see that you've paid twice. Allow me to refund one of your payments. Would you like to buy our protection plan?" Make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, this cybercrime is a business. These are essentially corporations that have benefits, dental, medical. In some countries, they are paying their taxes. And we need to view the threat, not just the nation state threat, but the cyber criminal threat, as something much more organized, much more sophisticated, much more modern than some guy in a hoodie in his mom's basement. And until we view the threat with the kind of sophistication that they view us, we will not win. And that's part of why I think so much of what Mr. Alcorn presented was so relevant, right? The enemy is using AI. The enemy is organized. Dark web marketplaces for stolen personally identifiable information, for stolen data, for stolen access to companies' computers. These marketplaces are as polished and as slick as eBay and Amazon. And so this is part of understanding the threat that we're dealing with. What's interesting, though, is that these sort of shadow corporations, these criminal enterprises, don't follow international law. They don't worry about cross-border clearances. They don't worry. In fact, they exploit the seams between our nations and between our borders and between our privacy laws. And so a big part of what we need to do as we legislate is take this into account. We cannot view these problems as national specific problems. We have to view them as global problems. So what are some of the challenges that we're facing right now? And when I say right now, I mean really right now. What has the current world environment here during this time of pandemic? What does the current cybersecurity threat landscape look like? Here's a handful of things that stick out to me. The first is that with the way that many companies responded to the COVID-19 crisis, a lot of companies went to remote work. Most companies, it seems, went to remote work. It's amazing that the internet, that information technology allows us to do that. In many ways, it has preserved our economies. And yet it creates an attack surface that many companies were not prepared for. There are a lot of companies where staff are working on their own computers, maybe through a VPN, maybe through a VDI, maybe through, maybe not, right? Maybe just using their own email or using corporate email through a web interface. The attack surface is very different from what your companies may be prepared for in advance. And this creates an opportunity for the adversary to gain access to your data. One of the most common problems we're seeing this year is ransomware. We have seen hundreds of new publicized cases of ransomware to the tune, in many cases, of hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in extortions. What that's really transferred to in a lot of cases, especially for large systemically important corporations like Citigroup, is that our third parties and our clients are becoming compromised. That presents a threat of compromise into our organizations through that trusted third party. It also disrupts our ability to provide services to our clients. And our clients, of course, include many of the governments here at this table. I think when we look at some of the bigger picture, some of the bigger picture threats or challenges, I should say, that we're facing right now, there's three that stand out to me. The first, actually, Ms. Mansoori really underscored very importantly, and that is we have a diversity problem in our industry. And so anything that your governments can do, that your legislations can do, that your initiatives can do to help us solve this problem of diversity, especially gender diversity within information security and cybersecurity, is greatly appreciated. The second thing is, at this point, we have a fairly unique situation in the information security world where the responsibility and the liability for insecure products, or products that are not properly secured, often falls to the victim instead of to the group that created or supplied the software. There's some reasons for that that are very understandable, and I'm not suggesting that we just go helter-skelter after software creators. However, we do need to look at how we are handling liability, how we are handling the way that we view responsibility for many of the vulnerabilities and, frankly, insecure bits of software that are a huge part of our global infrastructure at this point. The last challenge that I want to underscore is that in many cases, highly regulated industries, such as energy, such as banking, et cetera, are often held responsible to regulate or to shadow regulate, I should say, non-regulated industries. Again, software and many other providers. And is this the model that we want to continue to pursue? Not saying that it isn't necessarily, but again, something that we often don't consider, I think, when we're putting together our regulations and when we're legislating in this area. Now, what can we do going forward? What stands out to me? One of the first things really came out during today's presentations, which is we need to promote risk-based frameworks. But I want us to go a step further if possible. I want us to harmonize to the extent possible our regulations around those risk-based frameworks. Look at those frameworks that currently are being adopted by the most mature industries, those frameworks that seem to be doing the most good. Can we take our existing regulations and bring them in line with these frameworks, so that we reduce the regulatory burden while maintaining, or better yet, increasing the good outcomes of regulations that help companies be more secure? We need to legislate and regulate from a place of cooperative global strategy and not nation-level fear or very specific nation-level concerns. What this means is, as we're legislating privacy laws, data localization laws, reporting timeframes and reporting rules, or the way that we legislate and hold companies liable for information sharing in this space, how do those laws and regulations that we're putting forward help those things to be better, and how do those laws potentially have unexpected second and third order consequences that make it harder to do those things and make it harder for us collectively to secure the global cybersecurity or global information security world. Ultimately, I bring this up because this is a team sport. When I look at my peers at JP Morgan, Bank of America, HSBC, et cetera, I don't see competitors in the information security space. We share information as openly as possible and as legal and as allowable, given the existing frameworks. Because at the end of the day, what happens to one of my peers happens to me next, or has already happened to me and I haven't caught it, or is happening to me right now. And if we are not able to share this information freely and to feel like we're all on the same team, then the bad guys who are all playing on the same team will ultimately win. And that's not the outcome that we want. That's not the outcome that we're trying to produce here. And so, Robert, again, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. And with that, I hand it back over to you for questions and the remainder of the show.
Thank you, Jake. Really appreciate your comments as always. Very well to the point. Here's a question that has come in. In the absence of a treaty on cybersecurity, what else can or should we do to allow perhaps a template of laws which can be passed individually so we can have a standardized approach toward fighting cyber problems? Any comments on that?
So I'll step in momentarily, and then I'll yield to Patrick. So I think there are a handful of nations, and I think it's a lot of the big players in this space that need to bring leadership not just to their own table, but to the international table. I think the United States has done a lot of good work here. The Cyberspace Solarium Commission has been brought up several times. It's an excellent document. The current report, right, what they're doing is very good work. I would hope to see those very mature nations, right? The United States, Russia, China, and others, many of which are often viewed as competitors or frenemies in this space. We need to see them come forward with leadership to help bring the other areas into play. I think GDPR is an example of that happening, maybe potentially, maybe not potentially, but it is happening. And I think we need to see more of this kind of activity without, a UN-style approach. Patrick?
And it kind of dovetails on what Jacob is talking about. One of my subjects in my master's degree was the concept of soft law, because the pace at which the technology changes and the way information can be shared a lot of times cannot keep up with typical legislative policies. So if you look and study a little bit of the information around how the European Union and other organizations adapt mutually agreed upon frameworks from a business or a cooperative standpoint that eventually become legislation, it provides a stopgap measure so that these things can be put in place quickly and iterated upon to produce the most correct laws. Okay.
Very good. Any other comments on that subject?
Yeah, I would just add, echo those comments. Some non-traditional cooperative agreements seem to be maybe a more fruitful path to developing some shared understanding of how to approach these issues. One example is the agreement that the previous administration had made with China with respect to offensive cyber attacks. Those went essentially unheeded, and we suffered a series of cyber attacks at what we attributed to Chinese state actors. And so that agreement eventually kind of devolved, but that is one example of a non-treaty type scenario where governments came together, came to an agreement, an informal agreement, not memorialized by a treaty. The problem is obviously no enforcement mechanism there, and you're left with kind of your informal diplomatic solutions, and that's we're sort of back to square one with respect to that example. So it's possible, but it's difficult, and obviously without having the force of law behind you, it's the enforcement mechanisms are just not there.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. If I may just take part in this, I agree with Richard and other speakers. As I stated in my presentation, I think having soft laws or customary international law, which I think is available over there. But that in itself is not sufficient. Regardless how much soft law we have, and regardless how much customary international law we developed through this sectorial or regional practices, regional conventions, agreement, and so forth, that in itself is not sufficient to overcome the power vacuum or the coordination between us. As Richard said, and I agree with him totally, without a robust, comprehensive convention to tackle this, without a mechanism to bind us all, without a mechanism to monitor the implementation of our international legal principles and rules, then regardless how much effort we have, I think we are just wasting time. And I think it's not in the interest of all of us. It's not in the interest of private sectors. It's not interest of the governments. It's not interest of all of us, because this matter is important to all of us. So I don't want to be or to fall in this trap, which is the desire of even powerful countries not to have a legal certainty over this matter, and want to just to advocate for soft power, advocate for norms, advocate for less regulations, code of conduct. I think this is a trap, and I think we should avoid it ultimately. I think we should galvanize our efforts and do our best to, again, to work in a more binding instruments that bind us all.
Very well said. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that, Dr. Al-Qahtani. Any other comments as we close up our webinar? Do you have any closing statements that you want to make that you haven't been said yet? Well, thank you very much. This has been an extraordinarily helpful webinar on this critical issue. So important and helpful to parliamentarians around the globe to hear the insights and perspective of each of you. I would like to thank our Secretary of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, Ambassador Mutlaq Al-Qahtani, Patrick Alcorn, Her Excellency Ms. Reem Al-Mansoori, the Honorable David Rouzer, the Honorable Richard DiZinno, the Honorable Khalid Al-Hashemi, and Mr. Jake Norwood. Thank each of you for participating with us. Thank all of you for joining us to hear this today. I particularly want to say thank you to the Doha Forum and the Shura Council for their leadership in co-hosting this very important mission today that is so helpful and meaningful to parliamentarians around the globe. I really appreciate the assistance of the Foreign Ministry and also of Ambassador Al-Qahtani and his team. Great people. We've really had a very good experience on this. We look forward to 2021. We plan webinars and hopefully our live and active participating forums once COVID comes under arrest with the vaccine. We do have several forums already, or webinars planned for the early part of the year, one on human trafficking and one on illicit contraband issues, illicit tobacco and other efforts that we want to address. And then we'll go on to our forums. We have many countries around the globe who have offered to host these forums, many parliaments and speakers of the parliaments who have requested that they be host. So we look forward to the time when we can be together, but thankfully we do have technology today where we can join together in this very unique way. So we appreciate each of you. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to the next time and really appreciate the State of Qatar and the Doha Council and the Doha Forum for joining with us as a partner. Thank you very much. God bless you. Bye-bye.